With that down, let's move on to the fourth and final main topic today. And our fourth and final main topic today gets submitted to us by Eric the Reddington. Oh, I like that. Get the red? Reddington? Anyway. Hey, John. I saw an amazing fact graphic showing that Avengers Endgame has become the first quote-unquote biggest box office film of all time to not win any Academy Awards. Why did Avengers not get recognized when all the others did? All right, thanks a lot for sharing that, Eric. And what Eric is referring to is a great graphic that's been going around. And I'll be honest with you, I hadn't even really considered this. I hadn't thought about this until I also saw this infographic going around, and it's very, very true. When you look over the past X number of years at all the different films that at different times have held the title of the biggest box office movie of all time, all of them have won Academy Awards. Of course, Titanic has won 11. It's tied with Return of the King. And, what was the third one? There's a third movie that's tied with as well. I can't remember off the top of my head. Anyway, no other Academy film in history has ever won more than 11. So Titanic, which was the biggest box office movie for a while, had won 11. Gone with the Wind had won 10. Star Wars had won 7. Sound of Music had won 5. E.T. had won 4. Jurassic Park, Jaws, The Godfather, and Avatar all won 3. And then we get to the Avengers Endgame. It won none. None Oscars, Robert. None Oscars. As a matter of fact, it was it was only nominated for 1 Oscar, which is great. So the question is that gets raised here is, why does this movie not get any recognition when there are others in its fraternity, biggest box office films of all time, have? I think there's a couple of contributing factors to it, Rob. One or two small ones, and then one that I think is a major one. I'll share this with you, and then I want to hear what you think about it. I think one of the small contributing factors. Well, you know what? No, let me reverse course here. Let me go on what I think the big contributing factor is. The big contributing factor to me is the fact that, unlike all those other movies listed, let's bring them up again here. Titanic, not a sequel, not a part of a shared cinematic universe. Gone with the Wind, not a sequel, not a part of a shared cinematic universe. Star Wars, at the time, not a sequel, not part of any kind of franchise. At the time, not part of any franchise. Sound of Music, standalone film. E.T., standalone film. Avatar, at the time, just a standalone film, as was Jurassic Park, as was Jaws, as was The Godfather. All of these films were standalone at the time, original, straight out of the gate movies. For an original, standalone, straight out of the gate movie to, at those times, hit the box office heights that they had, you could not be anything other than excellent. You had to have an exceptional movie in order to hit those heights at the box office at the time. Times have changed. And see, Rob, I believe one of the biggest factors is why the Avengers is the first film of its kind to not get any Oscars is because, unlike all these other films that we're seeing on this list, Endgame was what? The 22nd film?
22nd film.
It was the 22nd film of a 10-year-long, 27 major Hollywood starring build-up franchise that climaxed in one big thing. And that's great. That's not a negative thing. That's a positive thing. That's a very positive thing. But what I'm saying is it makes it stand out as being very, very distinct from all the other films that are on that list. So you have all those things that we just talked about. Almost every major Hollywood star you can think of, 10 years of build-up, 20-plus films build-up, all culminating in one big thing. That was as much of a contributing factor to the box office success as almost anything else. It's certainly not the only thing. I'm just saying it's one of the big contributing factors. That is a very different set of circumstances from all the other films on that list.
Right.
And so I think whereas the other films needed to have a lot of pure cinematic excellence in them to win some Academy Awards, Avengers Endgame, you definitely had to be really good, but you didn't have to be awards echelon kind of good in order to get there because you had all these other factors as well. I mean, look, one of the other things is simply this. I don't think Avengers Endgame earned any Academy Awards. I mean, I don't think this is a matter that the Academy just decided to turn up its nose to it. As much as I like the MCU and as much as I enjoyed Endgame, and I've lost count of how many times I've watched it now, I've lost count of how many times I've seen this movie now. The fact of the matter is there is no category that it should have won in. It might have been able to get more than one nomination. Like I thought if Avengers Endgame had been nominated for Best Editing, I would have been cool. I would have been comfortable with that. I don't think it should have won, but if it had been nominated for Best Editing, I would have been comfortable with that. I think if it had been nominated in one or both of the sound categories, I would have been okay with that. But ultimately, at the end of the day, there was no category that it was a standout frontrunner that it should have won. So I think the big major part here is looking at what made Endgame so unique from all those other films on the list. The other thing was there just truly wasn't any category that it really stood out with that it should have won, I think. But anyway, Rob, you look at a really kind of staggering graphic like that, because I hadn't even considered that before, about every other best or highest box office film of all time had won Academy Awards. Endgame hasn't. What's your reaction to it, and what's your personal explanation for it when you think about it?
Well, look, I think you're absolutely right. When you're 22 films into a let's say, a franchise, I think that from the Academy's perspective, there's a level of craftsmanship that's just expected. You know, and the Academy Awards are looking for something that's outstanding. And as much as what I think is outstanding about the MCU is the fact that it worked. The fact that after 23 movies, including Far From Home, we have this amazing, epic fantasy, sci-fi, science fiction, superhero tale that we've never seen the likes of before and probably won't ever again.
And to your point, to make that even stand out more, others have tried. DC has tried to do it. They've had limited success. Sony's tried to do it. It just really makes it stand out just how good of a job they've done.
Hell, even Star Wars has tried.
Yeah.
You know, and I think
succeeded for a little while.
Right. And they can again. And I think that we have seen something that and unfortunately, look, it's not like when Return of the King swept the Oscars, because Return of the King at least they can go back and say, well, it's based on a beloved literary property that's one of the most important works of fantasy of the 20th century. This is based on, after all, comic books. And I think that a lot of the older members of the Academy, you know, Joker's a down-to-earth movie. And it's dealing with real issues, whether, like we said, healthcare, whether it's the inequities of the 1% versus the rest of us. But when you get to Avengers Endgame, we know how difficult it is to pull something like that off. But I think there's a large constituency that is like, come on, it's just another comic book movie choking up our multiplexes, even though we don't feel that way. I certainly don't. I thought it was both Infinity War and Endgame together are a staggering achievement. They really are. But I do think that ultimately that this is overlooked by the Academy as not special. Avatar was special. But this is just, of course, it's another Marvel movie. It's what we expect from them. They know what they're doing. And I think, unfortunately, you know, if you go back and you look what they were able to pull off with both Infinity War and Endgame, I think it's one of the great achievements in fantasy cinema in the history of movies. Because for those movies to work, everybody had to be in place. You had to love all those characters first. If you didn't, man, you wouldn't have cared. But when I was shedding a tear as Spider-Man is disintegrating or Black Panther is disintegrating, man, they got me in a way that you can't underestimate. So it's unfortunate they didn't get recognized, but I understand why.
But I don't know, man. When I think about that, look, we are now at 3 years in a row. 3 years in a row that comic book movies have been nominated in not just the technical stuff, in the major categories. Logan, Best Screenplay. Black Panther, Best Picture. Joker, Best Picture. Best whatever. And honestly, the problem is, Rob, what Academy Award would, like, let's say you're an Academy Award, you're an Academy member. Okay, so Rob, snap my fingers. You're an Academy member and it's 2 weeks ago while they're still casting ballots. And you're a voter. do you vote Endgame to win any Academy Awards? Which Academy Award do you give Endgame over the people who did win? And honestly, I can't think of a single one. I think maybe there's an argument for visual effects, but I just, that's why I don't know. When I hear some people say that it's because and this is true to a degree, the crotchety nature of the Academy voters. But then when I've asked friends of mine, a friend of ours, Cliff, right? I asked a friend of ours, same thing. I said, okay, but let's say you're an Academy voter. Which one do you say Endgame deserved to win? Is there any? And that's the hard part here.
You know, I would make an argument that to have a 3.5 or 3 hour movie move as fast as Endgame does, that's a marvel of editorial. But then I would also say, but Ford v Ferrari was a beautifully edited movie, and I just, there was a lot more. I think the editorial was a little bit more difficult in Ford v Ferrari, and also, if that's fair, and I couldn't say that Endgame is a better edited film than Ford v Ferrari, the winner of that category. You know,
but I'm with you. I would have been cool. I would have been totally okay. Like, I'm okay that it didn't get nominated for best editing, but if it had been nominated for best editing, I think I would have been. I don't think I would have batted an eye at that. I think that would have been. I would have gone,
sure.
yeah, the editing and it's great, but it's a tough question and a stunning little factoid. Again, full credit to the people who are fandom. This is a really stunning factoid that I don't know why more of us didn't think about going into it, but it's interesting at the least. It's interesting. But listen, guys, we are now in an era, not only where films like this are breaking big box office records. We're in an era now, and I think there's so many fans that take this for granted. We are in an era now where not only these films making tons of money, these films, again, we just talked about it 3 years in a row, that the Academy has bestowed the major nominations on comic book films, whether it was Logan, whether it was Black Panther, now Joker. Maybe there'll be another one next year for the 4th year. Maybe Scarlett Johansson next year is nominated for Best Actress for Black Widow. Who knows? Question is, guys, how do you feel about all that? Jump down to the comment section below and let us know your thoughts. Okay, guys.